There are books that begin with encouragement, and there are books that begin with confrontation. The road less traveled belongs to the second kind. Scott Peck opens with a sentence that has echoed through decades of readers because it feels both simple and piercing. Life is difficult. The power of that statement lies in how much it cuts through illusion. Many people spend years, sometimes entire lives, secretly expecting that life should become easier once they are older, wiser, more successful, more loved, or more secure. They imagine that difficulty is a temporary condition, a delay before real living begins. But Peck challenges this expectation from the very first page. Difficulty is not a mistake in the design of life. It is part of the structure of life itself. And once this truth is accepted, something changes. Energy that would have been spent resisting reality can be redirected toward meeting reality. This is the book's central movement. It asks readers to stop searching for escape routes around pain and instead begin the harder, more rewarding work of growth. The Road Less Traveled is not merely a psychology book in the clinical sense. It is also a moral and spiritual meditation on what it takes to become a mature human being. It is about discipline, love, truth, responsibility, and the difficult art of becoming real. At the center of the book is an argument that feels both demanding and clarifying. Peck believes that much human suffering is intensified not simply by pain itself, but by the tendency to avoid pain. We postpone difficult conversations. We deny uncomfortable truths. We flee responsibility. We seek distraction instead of reflection. We confuse temporary relief with real healing. In the short term, avoidance feels merciful. It seems to protect us. But the cost accumulates. Problems grow. Relationships become distorted. Emotional patterns harden. Life narrows. Peck's point is not that all suffering can be solved through sheer will. Rather, it is that mature living requires an honest willingness to confront what is hard. This is why the book speaks so strongly to readers who are tired of shallow reassurance. It does not promise that peace comes from finding a painless path. It suggests that peace comes from learning how to walk through difficulty with greater clarity and discipline. Growth begins when we stop negotiating endlessly with reality. When we accept that pain, effort, and uncertainty are woven into human life, we become more capable of meeting them intelligently. The book treats this shift not as punishment, but as liberation. To stop demanding that life be easy is, in a strange way, to become stronger and freer. One of the strongest and most memorable sections of The Road Less Traveled is its treatment of discipline. Peck sees discipline as the basic tool required to solve life's problems and therefore the foundation of spiritual and psychological growth. Without discipline, life becomes reactive. We live by appetite, mood, fear, and convenience. With discipline, we become capable of shaping our responses rather than merely surrendering to impulse. Peck does not describe discipline as cold severity. He presents it as a form of practical wisdom. It is what allows us to choose the better path when the easier path is tempting. It is what allows us to remain steady when emotions would otherwise scatter us. Discipline, in this sense, is not the enemy of freedom. It is what makes a deeper freedom possible. Without it, we become slaves to avoidance, indecision, dependency, and emotional drift. What makes Peck's view compelling is that he ties discipline directly to love, truth, and reality. He is not interested in self-control for appearance or status. He is interested in the kind of inner order that allows a person to live with integrity. Discipline becomes the bridge between knowing what matters and actually living in accordance with it. One of the key elements of discipline in the book is delaying gratification. This idea sounds simple, but Peck treats it as one of the deepest practical skills of adulthood. Many forms of immaturity grow out of the refusal to tolerate present discomfort for the sake of future well-being. We want the pleasure now, the peace now, the relief now, even if the long-term consequences are poor. We spend money to soothe feeling. We avoid hard work because it feels tiring. We refuse difficult honesty because it creates tension. We leave important responsibilities until crisis forces them upon us. Peck argues that mature people learn to reverse this instinct. They are willing to accept pain early so that greater problems do not accumulate later. They pay the emotional price in the present rather than allowing the debt to grow. This principle applies to nearly every area of life: parenting, marriage, work, health, finances, learning, and self-understanding. It is not glamorous, but it is transformative. Delaying gratification is one way of saying yes to a more stable and meaningful future. It is the discipline of accepting that worthwhile things take time and that easy relief is often misleading. Peck does not romanticize pain, but he insists that a person who cannot bear discomfort will remain trapped by the search for easy exits. Another essential part of discipline is responsibility. Peck believes that many people remain stuck because they do not fully claim authorship over their own responses. They may explain their lives primarily through circumstance, history, other people, or bad luck. And while such forces are real, the danger lies in letting explanation become passivity. Responsibility does not mean blaming oneself for everything. It means recognizing that one still has choices, even under imperfect conditions. The responsible person asks, what is mine to do? What decision am I making here? What truth am I refusing? What pattern am I repeating? What action am I postponing? Peck treats responsibility as psychologically and spiritually necessary because without it there can be no genuine change. If everything is always elsewhere, then agency never awakens. And yet responsibility is difficult because it strips away excuses. It asks us to see that some of our suffering is maintained by our own habits, evasions, and fears. That realization can be unsettling, but it is also empowering. Once responsibility is accepted, change becomes possible. The book quietly insists that adulthood begins where blame ends. Not because the world is fair, but because freedom grows when we stop waiting for someone else to do our inner work for us. Peck places unusual emphasis on truth. For him, mental health is not merely the reduction of symptoms. It is closely tied to the willingness to see reality as clearly as possible. This includes truth about oneself, truth about others, truth about motives, limits, relationships, and illusions. The problem is that truth often hurts. It disrupts identity. It challenges self-protective stories. It forces revision. And so people naturally resist it. They edit memory, rationalize behavior, protect ego, and maintain distortions that feel emotionally safer than honesty. Peck argues that this resistance blocks growth. A person cannot mature while remaining deeply committed to self-deception. Devotion to truth, then, is an act of courage. It requires self-observation, humility, and a readiness to let go of false versions of oneself. That is why the book feels morally serious. It does not say that truth is easy or automatically comforting. It says that truth is the ground on which real development happens. To love truth is to accept the discomfort of revision. It is to become willing to change because reality has shown you something your vanity or fear would rather ignore. Discipline in Peck's account also includes balance. Life is not solved by rigid formulas. The demands of responsibility, work, care, honesty, boundaries, and tenderness do not always align neatly. Sometimes we need firmness. Sometimes we need mercy. Sometimes we need persistence. Sometimes we need surrender. Peck recognizes that maturity is not just about holding principles, but about applying them wisely. Balancing means navigating tensions without collapsing into extremes. It means knowing when to protect and when to expose, when to push and when to wait, when to speak and when silence serves better. This part of the book matters because it keeps discipline from becoming mechanical. Peck is not advocating a hard, unfeeling life. He is advocating a thoughtful life, one in which courage and sensitivity develop together. That kind of balance requires attention, reflection, and self-awareness. It cannot be outsourced to slogans. It is part of what makes the road less traveled difficult. Wisdom is harder than rule following because it must be renewed in each concrete situation. One of the most famous and influential parts of The Road Less Traveled is Peck's discussion of love. He pushes against the sentimental assumption that love is simply a feeling, a rush of affection, or the emotional intensity of romance. For Peck, those experiences may accompany love, but they are not sufficient definitions. Love, he argues, is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. That definition changes everything. Love becomes active rather than passive. It becomes a matter of choice, labor, intention, and courage. It asks not only how deeply do I feel, but how responsibly do I act toward growth, mine and yours. This view strips love of some of its fantasy, but it also gives it greater dignity. Love is not merely what happens when attraction is easy and emotions are warm. It is what happens when attention, effort, truthfulness, and commitment are brought into relationship. Peck emphasizes that love often requires work. It asks us to listen when we would rather defend ourselves, to tell the truth when concealment would be easier, to set boundaries when indulgence would be simpler, to encourage growth rather than merely preserve comfort. In this sense, love is not the opposite of discipline. It is intertwined with discipline. Both involve the willingness to move beyond immediate gratification for the sake of something deeper and more enduring. A powerful feature of Peck's argument is that he spends time clarifying what love is not. He distinguishes genuine love from dependency, from emotional fusion, and from what he sees as simple cathexis or emotional investment. Dependency may feel intense, but intensity alone does not make it love. If one person clings to another primarily out of fear, need, or emptiness, then the relationship may be more about self-protection than mutual growth. Similarly, emotional attachment can be strong without being loving in any mature sense. People often confuse being unable to live without someone with loving that person deeply. Peck resists this confusion. Genuine love, for him, supports the expansion of the self rather than its collapse into need. It does not simply use the other person as a source of reassurance or identity. This distinction can feel severe, but it is one of the most clarifying parts of the book. It calls readers to examine whether their relationships are actually growth-giving or whether they are driven by fear of abandonment, loneliness, or emotional hunger. Real love, in Peck's vision, includes freedom, honesty, boundaries, and effort. It may be tender, but it is never merely possessive. Peck's definition of love becomes especially useful when applied to ordinary life. Love is not only a feeling reserved for dramatic moments. It is present in the parent who chooses patience over irritation, in the partner who practices honest listening, in the friend who tells the truth gently but clearly, in the teacher who challenges rather than flatters, in the individual who tends to their own growth rather than abandoning themselves. Love, in this sense, is a disciplined form of care. It is rarely glamorous. Often it is quiet, repetitive, and effortful. But it is precisely this quality that gives it moral substance. Peck is asking readers to stop romanticizing love and start respecting it. To love is to participate in growth. To love is to accept that what benefits another person is not always what makes the moment easiest. Sometimes love comforts. Sometimes it confronts. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it acts. But always, in Peck's account, it is directed toward the enlargement of life rather than the preservation of emotional convenience. The Road Less Traveled moves beyond psychology in a narrow sense and enters openly into spiritual territory. Peck does not present spirituality as vague inspiration or pious language. He connects it directly to maturity, humility, truth, and the capacity for love. Spiritual growth, in his account, is not escape from human complexity. It is a deeper encounter with it. The spiritually developing person becomes more honest, more responsible, more tolerant of mystery, and more willing to let go of egoic illusions. This aspect of the book helps explain why it has resonated so widely. It offers readers a framework in which inner development is not merely therapeutic but existential. The question is not only whether we are functioning efficiently, but whether we are becoming more whole, more truthful, more loving, more capable of relation to something beyond immediate self-interest. Even readers who do not share all of Peck's language often respond to the seriousness of this vision. He assumes that a human life has moral depth, that character matters, and that the inner journey involves more than symptom management. In that sense, the book remains unusual. It treats psychology and spirituality as overlapping domains in the work of becoming fully human. Among the more distinctive features of the book is Peck's discussion of grace. After emphasizing discipline and responsibility, he also recognizes that not everything in growth can be forced or engineered. There are dimensions of healing, timing, insight, and transformation that feel partly beyond deliberate control. He uses the language of grace to describe those realities. Whether a reader interprets this religiously, philosophically, or psychologically, the point is important. Human beings are not self-created machines. Effort matters, but so do mystery, receptivity, and the unexpected help that sometimes enters life. This prevents the book from becoming merely a stern manual of self-mastery. It leaves room for wonder, humility, and gratitude. We work, but we do not entirely manufacture ourselves. We choose, but we also encounter. Peck's view of growth is demanding, yet not entirely self-enclosed. There is a sense that when a person commits deeply to truth, love, and responsibility, something larger may also be at work in their life, drawing them toward wholeness. The title of the book contains its central moral image. The road less traveled is less traveled because it is harder. It requires self-examination, courage, patience, and repeated willingness to face what is uncomfortable. Most people, at least some of the time, seek the path of least resistance. They avoid conflict, responsibility, truth, discipline, and the labor of genuine love. Peck does not condemn this tendency with contempt. He simply insists that it does not lead to maturity. The easier path may provide temporary relief, but it leaves us emotionally underdeveloped and spiritually shallow. The difficult path, by contrast, strengthens character. It teaches endurance. It makes deeper forms of freedom possible. This idea is central to the book's lasting appeal. It honors the intuition that a meaningful life is not built by shortcuts. It is built by choosing what is difficult but right, what is honest but uncomfortable, what is loving but effortful. In that sense, the road less traveled is not a path for extraordinary people alone. It is the ordinary human path taken seriously. One reason the road less traveled remains memorable is that it places real demands on the reader. It does not flatter the audience with easy approval. It does not say that all one needs is more self-esteem, better affirmations, or more comfortable circumstances. It asks harder questions. Where are you avoiding pain? Where are you unwilling to accept responsibility? What truths do you refuse because they threaten your self-image? Are your relationships structured around growth or around dependency and comfort? Do you confuse loving feelings with loving action? Are you serious about becoming mature or merely interested in feeling temporarily better? These questions explain why the book can feel both challenging and transformative. It treats the reader as someone capable of serious development, but only if they are willing to undertake serious effort. That respect is part of the book's strength. It assumes that people can grow, but not without discipline. They can love, but not without work. They can become wiser, but not without honesty. For all its philosophical reach, the book also offers practical lessons that can shape daily life. It suggests that when discomfort appears, we should not immediately ask how to escape it, but whether it contains a task we need to face. It encourages us to practice delayed gratification in small ways, because the habit of tolerating discomfort strengthens every domain of life. It calls us to notice where blame has replaced agency and where excuses have replaced decision. It asks us to speak more truthfully, first to ourselves and then to others. It reminds us that love is something we do, not merely something we feel. And it suggests that spiritual life, however we define it, deepens when we become more humble, more responsible, and more devoted to reality. These lessons are not quick fixes. They are disciplines of character. Their power lies not in instant relief, but in gradual transformation. Peck's wisdom is cumulative. The book changes people not because it dazzles them with novelty, but because it repeatedly confronts them with truths they may already sense, but prefer not to live by. By the end of The Road Less Traveled, the reader is left with a vision of maturity that is both demanding and hopeful. Life will not become painless. Relationships will not become effortless. Truth will not always feel kind. Growth will not proceed in a straight line. But none of that means life is hopeless. It means life asks something of us. Peck's answer to that demand is discipline, responsibility, honesty, love, and openness to spiritual growth. These are not techniques to master quickly. They are commitments to renew over time. The road less traveled is not appealing because it is easy. It is appealing because it leads somewhere worthy. It leads toward a life that is more grounded, more truthful, more loving, and more fully inhabited. Perhaps that is why the book still matters. It does not promise escape from difficulty. It teaches that difficulty itself can become the path. And once we understand that, we stop waiting for the perfect moment to begin living well. We begin by facing what is here, accepting what growth requires, and walking forward with greater seriousness and greater courage.